Hello everybody, thought I'd make a video. So I stopped playing Tornado Shot a while ago because I got quite bored, and I played Tornado Shot loads and loads and loads, and I just didn't want to play the same generic build again. I will be playing a poison Tornado Shot character, probably Magic Find, when I'm done with my Corrupting Fever champion. This character is pretty strong. I'm at the point where I'm not really going to spend any more money on it because I don't need to, and the gain from spending that amount of money is going to be really minimal. Like something like gratuitous violence, exploded jewels. I could buy them, however, it's not really worth it for what I lose in order to gain something very minimal overall, because I'll go into that soon. But this is my Corrupting Fever champion, inspired by Rutu. A lot of people are playing Corrupting Fever this league, but I've sort of made a couple of changes to it to sort of fit what I want it to do. I'll just do this trade real quick. These have been sat in there for a very long time, but this champion is exceptionally strong, and I wanted it to hit a few sort of marks for a build that has this much investment without having to go for a headhunter. So the idea of this build was to be extremely strong and extremely sort of unkillable in most scenarios, whilst having good clear and enough single target for map bosses to not feel absolutely horrendous. And this is sort of what I've settled on. So if I go over the gear real quick, I've got a +2 wand with fractured damage over time multiplier, with fizz damage over time multiplier, plus level of all spell skill gems, and plus level of all physical skill gems. This also rolled minion damage and minion life on it, and I'll go over what I've done on the tree, and I've crafted attack speed. Optionally, you can craft attack speed and attributes, which I think I might be doing because it should save me one passive, because attributes are an extremely big issue on this build, just because of where we are on the tree and the gems and items we use. The gloves, I'm using Hemophilia with Vuln on hit, pretty mandatory, and the reason I didn't want to swap to the Gladiator jewels is literally because of those gloves. So these gloves save me a socket for me having to manually cast vulnerability. They give me explode, which is pretty good for one socket, for one item slot. The gloves I could get would give me I would be capped chaos res outside of flasks, and then I'd get implicits on the gloves, but I don't think the trade-off is really worth it for the amount of investment. Like, you gain very minimal, and then the playstyle becomes a bit annoying because you're having to manually cast vulnerability, so it's less reliable. So that's why I've done that. Ring, so this one just has dex, life, chaos res, and then I've crafted lightning res on it. So this ring is awful. It's just got tier 1 life, tier 2 chaos res, a really shit dex roll, and then it had an open suffix because I needed chaos res, so I crafted it on this. Cost me like 1 divine or something. It's really cheap. It just sort of had what I needed on it, so I've picked that up. Optionally, you can go for, if you don't need the lightning res, for example, you can go for something of dex, chaos res, life, and we go for dex, and you buy a fractured amethyst with a prefix that you want on it, ideally. So you could buy fractured tier 1 life. However, I'm not going to go into crafting gear because there's a way to craft rings that's really hard to explain it, so I'm not going to go into that. But this is the ring. Helmet, pride, mana reservation, efficiency, enchant, and then I've only got 7% increased mana reservation efficiency implicit because I didn't need more, so I didn't want to use like grand embers or grand ichors. I didn't need to, and then just Vuln effect for the secondary. And this has life, 2 resistance rolls, and then it had an open prefix, so I've crafted fizz taken as fire. Amulet's just a +2 amulet with a bunch of attributes, and then crafted life. I needed the attributes again, so that's why I've gone for this, and this was fairly cheap. I think I paid like 10 divines for it, so it's not too bad. The 4 vow, so if you don't want to use the 4th Val, you can just use Dialas. You won't gain Chaos Res, but you have a bigger HP pool because you'll take the life mastery. So the regenerate 3% of life per second is actually a life modifier. So you cannot take the 15% maximum life modifier if there's no modifiers on your body armor. With Dialas you can run that with this, but the regen is fairly good. So that's why I've got that. Physical damage taken bypasses energy shield, obviously, and armor also applies to chaos damage from hits, so it's pretty damn nice, and that synergizes with some stuff we have on the tree. Belt is just a triple res Stygian Vise with the Hunter life mod and tier 1 life on it, and I've used quality and life modifiers. As you can see, this belt gives me about 500 life, maybe a bit more because I have vitality reserved with life. Boots, I've just gone for fractured int. Ideally the strength roll here would be dex, and they've got movement speed and avoid being shocked and then crafted life. So these are for the Storm Shroud unique jewel that I'm using to have full ailment immunity, and they've got the avoid being stunned if you've killed recently on a champion, so the enchant on them is completely useless. And I've just gone for life regen, and obviously you need shock avoidance there for the 100%. The ring, synthesized iron ring, circle of guilt. I've gone for implicits. I needed were dex, int, and this one had a damage roll, so I've picked that up. This was only 2 divines, and this gives me 50% increased buff effect of Herald of Purity and 57% increased physical damage roll affected by Herald of Purity. So this is a pretty good one. It's making my Herald of Purity quite strong. So that's why I've gone with that. Shield, Sappho's frame. I've gone for a corrupted implicit of 8% of physical damage taken as chaos damage. So the whole point of this build is mitigating damage in forms of chaos or elemental, because we are using divine flesh, but I'll go into that later. So Sappho's flame with fizz taken as chaos. All resistances roll as high as possible. If you can do spell damage, secondary is nice for the reap, but the resistances roll is really nice. So if you can pick up a 30% with the same implicit, it's really good. And then gem links. In my wand I've got Herald of Purity and War Banner. I also have haste. I'm only using haste for Val haste. I'm not using it for anything other than Val haste during maps. Gloves, I've got Kinetic Blast. Anomalous Kinetic Blast is really important for the pierce. If you don't have the pierce, it's going to feel really horrible. Greater multiple projectiles, faster attacks, and life tap. Optionally, this faster attacks gem can be swapped out for maim if you feel like you're comfortable without it. Divergent fork, which gives you an additional pierce and more projectiles, so it might be handy for like when you need super clear speed, like a really high density map, because you're going to be forking projectiles and then they're going to be coming back with Vengeance Cascade. It gives you a lot of clear, but I've personally stuck with the faster attacks just because it just feels a lot better. In the boots I've got Molten Shell, which I'm manually casting, linked to life tap, and then I have shield charge, faster attacks as my movement speed. All of these are linked to life tap. And then in the shield, vitality. So I have a level 1 vitality. This is because I have a Watcher's Eye that gives me regen. So I just decided to fit it in because it's only reserving 90 life. So that's obviously linked to arrogance. And I have my Blood Rage here. You don't link Blood Rage to life tap because it costs life anyway. So there's no, this can go anywhere that you have a free green socket. Helmet, Enlighten level 4, Pride, Determination, and Malevolence. Ideally, if you don't run an Enlighten, you just don't run Herald of Purity. So if you can't afford Enlighten, just don't run Herald. Or you can run an Enlighten level 3 and possibly still run it if you anoint Charisma, but I wouldn't do that personally. Chest gem links, Awaken Swift Affliction, Anomalous Corrupting Fever. So Anomalous is good because it gives you 10% reduced life cost. So when you have a lower HP pool like me, it's only costing 3k life, and you're regenning so fast anyway, but it's only costing 3k life, so that's why I've gone for Anomalous. You can pick up a 2120 for about 2 divines, so it's not too expensive. Efficacy, Val Reap. Ideally you want a 21, but a 2120 Val Reap is like 20 divines, and it's just really not worth it, especially for just mapping content. You don't need it unless you're doing like delirious maps, And even then I wouldn't be doing like 100% deli, so you don't really need 21 unless you want to like super min-max this build. It's optional. It is a decent amount of damage, but I wouldn't recommend spending 20 divines on a 2120 Val Reap. Awakened Brutality, obviously we're doing no chaos damage and no elemental damage, so it's just a 44% more multiplier to our physical damage. And then an Empower, obviously this gives +3 level of socketed support gems. The 4th Val I'm using is +2 duration. If you can't get a +2 duration 4th Val, then just keep using Dialas, because you're going to lose so much damage if you lose those gem levels. Flasks, I'm using Dabbler's Granite, so increased armor with reduced duration and increased effect. I'm using a Progenesis, so this isn't mandatory, I just wanted it because I wanted to be immortal, and it has 100% uptime, so I'm always at my chaos resistance cap during maps, which is very important. It is softcore, so I don't mind being conditionally immortal, especially when the condition has like a 99.9% uptime. Ideally I would have chaos res somewhere else to mitigate this, but as you can see my resistances are a bit scuffed, and it's quite difficult to balance that. Silver Flask with increased attack speed, obviously Dabblers again with reduced duration and increased effect. And then Alchemist Quicksilver Flask of the Cheetah, and that is obviously reduced duration, increased effect and movement speed. On the Life Flask you want an Ebullient Divine Life Flask of Allaying, so this is Corrupting Blood immunity, reduced amount recovered, but 135% recovery rate and 50% recover instantly. That's so you can use Corrupting Fever, use your Life Flask, and then regenerate really quickly without like getting one shot. And obviously the Progenesis helps with that, because if you take a big hit during Progenesis Flask effect, that's going to be recuperating, you're going to be using Corrupting Fever, and then you're going to be regenning all of that HP back, because I have gone for quite a lot of life regen on this version of the build. Passive tree is pretty standard for a Fizz over time build, so obviously we're a champion, gone for inspirational, first to strike, last to fall. So this is for adrenaline. You want to be using your Corrupting Fever every 20 seconds to maintain that uptime, even if you still have the Corrupting Fever debuff or buff active. And then we've gone for Unstoppable Hero, Fortitude. So Unstoppable Hero does like nothing for the build until you have Fortitude, right? Because yeah, you don't get fortified from anything else. Important things on the skill tree would be cluster jewels. So I've got 2 cluster jewels with Battle Hardened, Master of the Fundamentals, and Furious Assault. So I've actually unspec'd out of Furious Assault because they gave like nothing. These were like 1% damage per node, so I actually unspec'd out of these. So I've got 1 here and 1 here. In terms of other jewels I'm using, I've got a Forbidden Flesh matched with a Forbidden Flame, and I've gone for Headsman. So this gives you 10% attack speed and movement speed if you've killed a rare enemy, and 20% cold, which is really big. My Watcher's Eye, so this Watcher's Eye is quite bad, but it was 1 divine, and it's why I've put Vitality. So I regenerate 1.3% of life per second while affected by Vitality, so that's just a bit of free regen. I'm sacrificing 50 life instead of 60 life or something for the extra regen, which is nice for the recovery because it just gives you that little safety net. And then 55% increased physical damage while using Pride. Ideally you can spend like 20 divines and get a melee of damage over time multiplier with Fizz using Pride, or you can swap the Pride roll for a Malevolence roll and go for the Vitality setup. Like I have the bit of regen, but this jewel is alright, and I picked up for about 1 divine, so not too many complaints. Up here I have just a normal Viridian jewel, so it's got Dex, Fizz damage, and physical damage over time multiplier. I would go for life on this, but if you add life to a jewel like this, it's going to cost you about 2 to 3 divines for the Dex roll or any attributes. So I bought a free modded one with Dex, Global Fizz, and Fizz damage over time multiplier, and slammed it. I got trap damage, unlucky, but yes. And then in this one I've got my Forbidden Flame obviously, and then Storm Shroud for the ailment immunity. And then up here we've got a energized armor, so this gives me, if I press my character panel, as you can see, this is giving me like 12k armor, so it was really solid. Nothing really comes out better than this. And then armor and energy shield mastery, you want 10% of armor, also applies to chaos damage taken from hits, and 10% of physical damage from hits taken as chaos damage. And then we are combining that with the glorious vanity Zibakwa to get divine flesh, so all damage taken bypasses energy shield, 50% of elemental damage taken as chaos damage, and then maximum chaos res. And then in combination with that, you want to pick up a fizz. You need to have one with a 1-point node that gives you fizz damage leached as life. Otherwise, you're going to have to use a really shitty belt. You're going to have to use Durrani's Invitation. So this belt is fucking awful. Okay, it's really, really bad. Like, it's fine and it's cheap. You can pick one up for about 30 chaos, as you can see. But this belt is just dog shit compared to something like a Stygian Vise. Like, it's basically the same, except my Stygian Vise gives me about 500 more life. So if you're on a budget, you can run this if you don't get a Fizz Leech node. But obviously you want the physical leech here, because if you inevitably make enough money to farm a Headhunter on a build like this, you don't want to have to like fuck around and change everything up. So Fizz damage leeches life is mandatory. And then I've got another one here, so this just has max chaos res and 15 chaos res. You can get other good nodes like around this area, like there's aura effect down here, and there's stuff like that. So if you just buy a random one, always have a look in POB, because you might have picked one up quite cheap. And then I have a unnatural instinct here. So this is a very, very powerful slot for an unnatural instinct. As you can see, it's 10% spell damage, cast speed, 12 life, 24% maximum mana regen, increased area of effect, increased skill effect duration, life regen, area effect of hex skills, increased mana reservation efficiency of cursed aura skills, reduced mana cost of chaos skills. So those are all pointless, but you get 10 strength, 20 int, and 34% increased physical damage. So this is like as good as it fucking gets for this build. You benefit from like majority of those nodes, so it's really, really powerful. And I've picked up the Fizz damage over time multiplier nodes here. And then other masteries, so physical mastery, 40% increased physical damage of skills that cost life. Obviously we're doing corrupting fever, and all of our skills here cost life, so it's just a bit more damage. And reservation masteries always have 10% increased effect on you and 8% increased damage for all aura or heralds affecting you, which is why I went for a vitality here, because it's like it's a really minimal DPS gain, right? But I'm benefiting from the watchers that I've got somewhere, benefiting from the watchers, and I'm getting the additional damage from the reservation mastery. And I've gone for spiritual aid up here because my wand has minion damage roll on it, so it's not great, but it's pretty big, and it makes this wand quite good compared to a lot of options on the market. And this only cost me 8 or 9 divines. It's very, very cheap. Other important parts of the build, that is pretty much everything. Oh yeah, resolute technique, you need that. The POB will be in the description anyway, and the link to Ru2's kind of video on the build will be there as well. I'm not going to do a map because I am working on a little project that I've set up, testing out a little strategy of my own to see how well those should not be in there, those need to go in the currency tab. So I'm testing out a little strategy of my own to see how well Cemetery synergizes with a couple of mechanics that I'm a big fan of. I will make a video on that soon, but that is it for the Corrupting Fever Champion. So if you enjoyed this video, let me know. There will be a currency farming video coming out soon. The strategy I'm doing is very, very good, so be sure to look out for that. And thanks for watching, and see ya.